Hi,
Hi,
who are you?
I am Almar and I'm an addict.
What kind of addict?
Attention addict. I love attention. Any attention.
And what are we doing here?
We're making a podcast.
What is that about?
It's about things like people's stories, how they ended up where they are, ended up doing what they're doing. And it was supposed to be about something else, but I ended up with this.
Who are those people?
These are my friends. Basically my network, because I wanted to make a show about me, but I didn't really have anything to talk about. So I ended up looking at the network. The network was interesting, so I kind of thought, okay, I can maybe make something with this.
So, do you have already a name for this podcast?
Yeah, it's called The Bunker. How the hell did we end up here?
And how is it connected to the theme?
How the hell did we end up here? So basically people's stories and how they went from A to B and then to C, and with coincidences, decisions, traumas, basically anything that moves you to the direction or the point where you are.
So, how often are you going to have this podcast?
I'm not sure, but maybe like two times a month, 3 times a month.
So, do you take yourself seriously enough? Do you have some sponsors?
Yeah, like every other professional podcast, then of course I have sponsors. I have the Oat Bar. That's the greatest thing in Karlin. Sells amazing oatmeals and skyr. Everything is handmade. And it's available from 8 to 3 during the weekdays, closed on the weekends, but you can order on Volt as well. And it's a place that you really want to go. Healthy yet tasty.
Sounds
And
good.
then I have a company called Alfred. It's alfred.cz. It's a place where you can find jobs. You can set up a job watch. You can get notified whenever there's a cool job coming along. And it's a great solution for anyone who is either looking for a job or wants to change jobs, because you can find the right job without spending time looking for it. It's available in Czech, English, and Slovak. And check it out. Alfred.cz. So yeah, those are the guys. Welcome to The Bunker. On this episode, I have Richard Grannon. Richard is the Spartan Life Coach. He has written books, done seminars, lectures, and videos, and helped thousands of victims of narcissism worldwide. He does this through his YouTube channel, as well as his homepage, spartanlifecoach.com. But there was a time in Richard's life when he needed help. And the journey hasn't been easy all the time. So we talk about that, Neuro Linguistic Programming, narcissism, and the effect of COVID on mental health and people's lives. And what you can do to keep your shit together during those weird times. Enjoy. Welcome, Richard. Welcome to The Bunker.
Thank you very much for having me on.
How are you today?
Really good, actually, yeah, really good.
Me and Richard, we met at the Oat Bar. The Oat Bar is one of the sponsors of The Bunker. How the hell did we end up here? How come that you're a frequent customer of the Oat Bar, Richard?
Well, I love going to the Oat Bar because they do really, really good coffee, which is, especially their flat whites. It's not always easy to find a good flat white. But they're nearby and I can get... they'll do oats with skyr there, a high protein bowl of healthy oats. So yeah, that's a good way to start the day.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that, because most customers that come to the Oat Bar, they seem to be coming back.
Good.
So you're here in Prague, but and working remotely, kind of like you work online primarily, right?
That's right, yes.
What is it that you do?
Well, I used to coach online, but I don't do that anymore. I now have coaches who coach for me online. So most of my time is spent developing courses in the form of videos, books, and audio material, trying to solve the larger problems that most of my audience, most of my followers have. That's what my days are filled up with.
And what kind of like psychological or
Psychological, predominantly. The psychological problems can often be cultural and societal as well. At the moment, I'm having a big focus on codependency and people pleaser syndrome. So where people are being excessively agreeable and fawning and submissive too much by compulsion. We're very much focused on that right now.
And so if you would say, if you had one word to say, what are you, other than Richard?
I probably would say that the most accurate description for what I'm doing right now, and the safest way of describing it, is content provider. I'm a content provider because I'm not a qualified psychotherapist. In the UK, you can say you're a psychologist. It's not a protected term, but I mainly speak to Americans, and it is a protected term there. So life coach sounds kind of cheesy. So I just say I'm a content provider.
Okay, sounds good. So you're from the UK, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where and when and all that stuff?
Well, I'm I'm from the Wirral, which is a peninsula that is by Liverpool. We're the peninsula with the most Viking DNA, by the way. Mm-hmm. So that's we have a lot of our town names. They're actually Viking town names. That was a place that the Vikings loved hanging out. So I'm from the Wirral, very young. I moved with my family to Portugal, and I spent some years growing up in Portugal. And then eventually I went back to the Wirral in my teenage years. Went on to study down at Aston University in Birmingham, where I got a degree in psychology.
Mm. How was life there in Birmingham and around?
Birmingham's an interesting place. It's not a place I would rush back to. I love the people there, but it's actually, that was back in 1996, and it was a pretty rough city. I think when I was 18 years old, just living inside of a city centre can always be a little bit difficult. But yeah, it's pretty rough and tough city, Birmingham.
Ozzy Osbourne is from there.
He's actually from Aston. Yeah, he's from near the Aston Triangle. Yeah, so he's from right by my university. Yeah,
and I think he still has a house there. I read in his biography, and he kind of seems to love it around there.
Yeah,
it's probably a place where you can eat bats and stuff.
Yeah, nobody would judge you in Birmingham for eating bats. That's the mildest thing you could do in Birmingham.
And Duran Duran is also from Birmingham.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they are. It's the same thing. I read the biography of the bass player.
Yeah.
From there, and how you had siblings, or how was family?
Yeah, I have one sister who lives in California right now, who I'm actually trying to see by Christmas time, which is, why I'm on a bit of a journey going to Slovakia today to eventually go on to the UK. We're then going to cleanse ourselves of the EU zone, because to get into America, you have to have spent 14 days not in the EU. Hopefully, somewhere in the Caribbean. Get a bit of sun, and then get into America after that. Hopefully, if we're lucky. And
how come that you ended up here in Prague? I mean, what brought you here?
What series of coincidences and events led me here? Well, I ended up in living and working in Ibiza last year, and I was working on a book that a year later I trashed the first 80,000 word manuscript for and started again. I've just started it again now. And whilst I was living and working there, an American chap who also happens to be from California, from LA, who's been living here for a while, called Pierre XO, he invited me to do an interview with him. We did a few interviews, we were chatting, we became friends, and he said, come over to Prague and visit. So I came over in the summer last year and fell in love with the place. I mean, it's just, I really, really don't like cities, but Prague is Prague's special, very, very special place.
How?
I'm not even sure. I wouldn't class it. I think it's misleading. Prague is a city, of course, but it's misleading to even class it as a city. in a sense, in the sense that subjectively, when you live here, you can experience it more as a large, sprawling, medieval town where time and space don't seem to function normally. Prague is on its own time. Prague has its own reality, its own soul, and so you do have some of the city elements that are not so nice here. But generally speaking, it's a very beautiful place to be, and it's very calming. Where most cities really aggravate the fuck out of me. I just can't wait to leave them.
Yeah.
London's like that. Liverpool's like that. I hate the places. Can't wait to get out of them. Drive me mad. But here, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, I think I can say the same. And often, I think often people that live here, like expats and foreigners that live here, they tend to maybe see the downsides, which are, I mean, they're everywhere. But in the end, for me, this is a very livable city somehow. And like you say, it's not a stressful place to be in.
Yeah.
So you studied in Birmingham psychology, right?
Yes. Not at Birmingham University. I did have friends at Birmingham University, but I was at Aston. The reason I have to make that distinction is because people who went to Birmingham would be like, oh, well, that's a red brick university, whereas Aston's a Polytech. But yeah, I studied there for 3 years and got my degree in psychology. While I was there, I studied Neuro Linguistic Programming at the same time with one of the founders, Richard Bandler. And I think I got my practitioner qualification when I was 18 in my first year of study.
Mm-hmm. And this was why? Or, I mean, did you always know that you wanted to study this, or was there was there Richard the footballer or Richard the chef? Or?
There was Richard the wannabe MI5 agent. So my father worked in intelligence when he was actually through working for the RAF. A lot of my family are police and military. So my trajectory was university, being sponsored by the army, to then do officer training at Sandhurst, to do maybe 3 to 8 years on an officer's commission in a decent enough regiment, to then hopefully move on from there into intelligence afterwards. That was the ambition. A few things happened that disrupted that. One of them was that on my final test before I could join Sandhurst, the night before, I went out with some of my friends to a gay bar. It was a Sunday night, and the only two places in Chester, the city we were in, that you could go to, one was a place full of townies where we probably would have gotten beaten up. So we chose the gay bar because they had good deals on drinks and good music. And I actually got glassed in there. The guy hit me in there. A guy went in there to beat up somebody who was gay, and he picked me. And he hit me with a glass. And that meant that because I got concussion and quite strong, there was lots of little pieces of glass that shattered and went into my face. And the army said, give it 6 months. During that 6 months, 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. So I got smashed in the face with a glass. Then 9/11 happened. And I don't know. I don't want to derail the podcast, but I watched that happen. I remember very clearly. I was in a shop with my father watching it happen, and I knew that what we were being told. Well, we all knew. Everybody in the shop was like, "This is not real." Or rather, what we're being shown and what we're being told as it happens live is not what's real. So I was there watching it live. The first tower had gone, and then the second tower went down, and it was clear that something was majorly wrong. So back then in 2000, 2001, British Army, we'd been in Africa. Obviously, we'd been in Bosnia. A lot of the role of the British Army at that time was peacekeeping. And then we had, 18, 19 years of pretty aggressive warfare in Afghanistan and Iraq. So it changed the prospects of what my army life would look like, which I was okay with. I mean, I actually wanted to join the parachute regiment. So I was okay with that. But 9/11 just made me, I didn't know why we were in Afghanistan. I didn't know why we were in Iraq. And my father, who was in the military, he was also sort of saying, this is not... He was defending the country against the threat of Russian spies. That's what he was doing. And it was a clear enemy.
Yeah.
This was not. This was obviously some sort of... something odd was happening. So I waited a couple of years. The army stayed in contact with me. They really, really wanted me to join because I'd passed the tests previous to that with flying colours. I'd done potential officer training. They wanted me in, but I just couldn't do it. I just I was like, I can't be a part of that. It really shook my worldview. I then started looking at the police as a secondary option whilst waiting to join the police. I ended up doing nightclub security work, and then I spiraled into violence and cocaine addiction for about 7 years. And that's a whole story. I ended up finally in 2010 leaving the UK and going and doing nightclub security work in New Zealand. And I started to get straightened out then. After a year, I lived in New Zealand for a year, and I started to straighten myself out. And I'd been teaching, I was doing nightclub security and teaching self-defense online. I had a YouTube channel teaching self-defense. It eventually got cancelled because it was considered too violent. My life was just in a holding pattern, basically, from the moment I got glassed to the age of about 30, 31. I was just, not really doing anything, wasn't really going anywhere. And I decided that's when I should start trying to use the degree. I knew that I had a gift for psychology because I'd done, whilst doing nightclub security and teaching self-defense, I had also worked as a contractor in the British education system for about 5 years, helping kids to learn and helping teachers to teach. And I'd done well there. But, I fell prey to some of the flaws in my own nature as far as addiction went. And cocaine really had a good grip of me.
How was that? I mean, like, were you daily use or was it partying or how
it was it was started as partying. Then it became, I was so bored doing nightclub security. Looking back, I can see why. It's a boring job, and I was surrounded by idiots. And basically, nightclubs are intellectual black holes. There's no cerebral stimulation there whatsoever, and I didn't know that I needed that. So I was bored. I was just totally bored, totally depressed. The thing that I'd wanted to do with my life, I believed was a sham. I believe the British Army ended up being used as a cat's paw for American corporate interests. 19 years later, I've had confirmed by friends who followed that path for many years that's exactly what happened. And when they came out of the army and they started working in private security, basically as mercenaries, they ended up being re-employed by, little agencies that were little spin-offs of the CIA to keep the drugs moving in Afghanistan. I've got friends who've told me they watched opium fields being harvested by the CIA. There's a little sideline story, actually. One of my friends, he was on a contract who was being run by a female agent for the CIA, making sure that the opium harvest was kept going. This is the British and Americans working together. Apparently, the Brits give information on when a field has been harvested, and then tells the Americans go in and say, we're destroying this field after it's harvested, and flamethrower it and say, well, we've destroyed another poppy field.
Yeah, it counts in the statistics.
Exactly. And the operative he was working for, she started kicking off. She started trying to be a whistleblower. And they were drone struck. They were hit with a drone.
What a surprise.
Yep, it's crazy. They got a warning. They got a 15-minute warning. And they eventually got drone struck, and she left, obviously terrified, and he left that company that he was working for. So it's I had the distinct impression I was going to get used, that it wouldn't mean anything, and I would be, well, as an officer, maybe I would get hurt, but I definitely oversee men being hurt for no good reason other than somebody else's profit. So yeah, it really, really shattered my worldview. And it took me about 7 years to recover from that. But I didn't know that's what my problem was. I had no idea that's what my problem was. And so, yeah, I was in a holding pattern for a long time. And cocaine stimulated me whilst I filled in the gaps. But it did get to the point where I was a daily user. It did get to the point where I would snort coke with my morning coffee. Now, I'm not a stupid man. I knew that was a problem. And ironically enough, when I graduated from university, my first job was as a drugs counsellor for the probation service. So I only worked with criminals who were criminals because of drug addiction. So I understood the cycle perfectly well. But I struggled to break it because I was always focused on dealing with my addiction to cocaine. And I never focused on why I was addicted.
The root.
As soon as I shifted the route, I was fine. It was an amazing cure. I said, what I tell people is it took me 2 days to kick my addiction to cocaine, which was I needed intellectual stimulation. And once I found it, it was done. I didn't need cocaine anymore. I wasn't bored anymore.
And where was that enlightenment? Or, I mean, where's that moment, the turnaround?
I mean, there was a few, they say with addicts, you have to hit rock bottom. There's a few moments. Like I remember waking up and I'd already chopped the line the night before that I was going to snort so that I didn't even have to get out of bed before I snorted coke. And I was like, this is not, I woke up and looked at it and was like, this can't be good. This can't be how to live. I was doing nightclub security and I was a manager for a security firm on construction sites. And I needed to snort a line of coke when I was checking my security guards on the construction site. And I had to wade through mud in a suit to get to the portaloos so I could snort coke. And the guys on the construction site were watching me and they were just looking at me like, what the fuck are you doing? What is wrong with you? And I certainly felt like they knew what I was doing. And I just remember having this moment of like, I think this might be rock bottom. I think this might be, I need to change my lifestyle here.
Did you have valleys on the, like when you were going through the dirt in the suits, did you have valleys on at least?
I actually don't think that I did. Oh. I don't think that I did. It was so disgusting. Like I became like Gollum in the Lord of the Rings when it came to cocaine. I was really... I've always been so jealous of people who can snort a few lines of coke at a party and then they just politely wipe their nose and sip their champagne and carry on. I'd be rubbing the board and sticking it in my gums and I was an animal. And I could never get high enough. Some people would snort coke and say that's enough. I was like, what are you talking about? Let's keep going. I was just a monster, total monster for it. And I never felt... some people would say, oh, I've had enough. I feel paranoid. I don't want to do anymore. I was like, no, just keep going. Do more. And as I'm sure you know, it eventually induces psychosis. I mean, you're not sleeping. You're high all the time.
And don't you get paranoid?
As hell. Paranoid as hell. Cranky, paranoid. You introduce, some steroids in there as well and a bit of alcohol. And eventually I got in trouble fighting and I was working security, so I was getting in fights with people. There's no shortage of people in Liverpool to fight with. And eventually I hurt someone.
Were they all Everton fans?
I jolly well hope so. Yeah. Those deviant, corrupt bastards.
But how can you maintain a lifestyle like this? Both, financially and what about relationships and stuff like that?
Oh, I had a wonderful relationship with another drug addict. We just cheated on each other all the time and abused each other completely. And I financed it by being a workaholic. I'm not, my ancestry is Irish. We're Irish immigrants, and we went to England to work, and it seems to have been burnt into the DNA. So I would knock out. With the nightclub security, I was a good doorman. I did a good job. And I was well used, and I did a good job for the daytime security. So I could get like a 60-hour week going. So I could just about afford it. But yeah, my life was a mess, total mess.
And how can you maintain like a relationship with your family, or I mean your parents, and how does that work?
My family started to reject me and to let it be known that I wasn't welcome. It wasn't just the drugs, it wasn't just the nightclub security, it wasn't just the violence and the chaos. I was really changing. I was becoming a different person, and I was surrounded by low-level criminal narcissistic psychopaths, and there was more of them than me. And in order to survive in that environment, I became far more psychopathic and narcissistic than I had been going in. And my life was, I think it had become a tragedy, but it was on the verge of becoming a total catastrophe. Because in the end, I'm not a criminal. That's not my inclination. I'm not a gangster. And I found that out. When I got in real trouble, I just got very scared. And when there was the possibility of prison, I was like, oh, I don't like this anymore.
Yeah.
And it scared me straight.
And this is what, 6-7 years or?
Yeah, it probably was in that mess, slowly descending into it for about 7 years. And I think I got in real trouble. So I started when I was 21. And then by the time I was 28, I had my first taste of real trouble. Like, it was really, really bad. It was either prison or death. And it wasn't a vague idea of prison or death. It became, this could be real for you. And weirdly, prison was more frightening. The idea that I was actually going to be shut in a room with other men, possibly on 23-hour-a-day lockdown, was more frightening than getting shot dead. Maybe that's not a rational choice, but I remember very distinctly at the time thinking, Jesus, no, I can't do that. That would be torture for me, total torture. And so, yeah, I started straightening myself out from that point.
And how, I mean, did you go into any sort of rehab, or was there, you did it on your own, or?
I did it on my own. The way that I did it was I left the country and I took it was like a firewall in my head. I took a break by going to Tenerife and doing door work. And I just lost all my contacts for drugs. Any friends, any dealers, anybody, just threw them out the phone. I actually got that advice by watching an interview with she was famous, I don't know if she is now, called Tara Palmer Tomkinson. She was like a British socialite, posh girl from London. She burnt through the septum in her nose. She had made a hole through her nose through cocaine use. And she said it really is a lifestyle problem rather than a physical problem. And she talked about throwing away her little black book of friends and contacts. So I just deleted them off my phone. And when I went to Tenerife, which was full of cocaine, I actually was living with dealers. Crazy. But everybody knew that I had a problem. And I established a new identity there, which was I was a drug user. I will drink with you. I will drink until we fall unconscious. I'll go out with you. I'm up for partying. You can never, ever offer me any drugs ever. And as dumb as that nightclub and security environment is, once I established those rules, it was like, you don't ever offer Richie anything. Don't do it. We just don't do that. And nobody pressured me. Nobody ever did. I did end up living with a dealer in Tenerife for a short time who had night blindness. And he used to get drunk and bring girls home and offer them Coke. And one night he'd spilled bags of Coke, little 20 euro bags all across the living room floor. I came home, took a shower, walked out with my shoes up in bare feet, and there was bags of cocaine sticking to the floors of my feet. And I was like, God's really testing me right now. He'd have no idea if I snorted. But I didn't do it. Because by that point, I really was aware that of how much damage it had done me. It really had done me no favors whatsoever, and had wasted some good years of my life. And I'm vain about my intelligence. I have intellectual vanity. And I was like, if this actually if the Coke starts corroding brain cells, I would be pissed off.
And then you're basically around 30 around this time, right? Mm-hmm. And then you start using this NLP, this Neuro Linguistic Programming.
That's right.
Did you use that? I mean, well, first of all, maybe what is that? I mean, for us common people,
for the uninitiated, it's it's a type of, it's probably best understood as a kind of self-help psychology. It came out of California in the 1970s, which tells you a lot. That context, that time, sort of like westernized Buddhism, Enlightenment, New Age movement, post-hippie. So you had the hippies, and then they were moving into becoming, the hippies became yuppies. So they needed a transitory philosophy, and there were many of them. People became more materialistic. And so it's created by a guy who's into computing and a guy who was into linguistics. And I think they jacked a lot of the stuff that was like, they're open about it. They took things from Fritz Perls with Gestalt therapy, a ton of Ericksonian hypnosis. They just stole a bunch of concepts from a bunch of people, put them together. There was elements of Maxwell Maltz, psychocybernetics. There was other motivational speakers of, there was the New Thought movement. It's very American. There was the New Thought movement. Then there's been this thrust, this awkward sort of combination of philosophy, psychology, and American materialism, consumerism together. And it has created these sort of hybrid sort of philosophies, psychologies, and NLP is one of them. That sounds very dismissive. I actually think NLP in its essence is a very, very good tool, but it's so steeped in this cultural baggage that it's hugely associated with smarmy salespeople, manipulation, and narcissistic psychopathy, ironically enough.
Yeah, because I just, when I started reading about it, then I wouldn't say it has a good name to it. I mean, I was surprised, actually, because I had heard the term or seen the abbreviation multiple times, and I've heard about it, but I hadn't really read about it. And then when I started reading about it, I said, okay, this has been given some sort of a bad name, almost like a cult feeling.
Well, because it functions as a cult, unfortunately. And at least one of the founders has grandiose narcissism, at least, probably psychopathy as well. He's a textbook grandiose narcissist. And unfortunately, there is really good stuff in there, but they can't help overstating their claims. Now, if you want to say that you're doing psychology, well, then you're, whether you like it or not, you're saying you're doing science, or at least you're attempting to be scientific. And some of the claims are just absurd. They're totally non-scientific. And when they've been tested in laboratory environments, they've been torn apart because, of course, they would be. They're stupid assertions, not based in any real research or any anything that would even approach being an acceptable level for a scientific standard. The good elements of it are the frame that it comes from, which is human beings run patterns of behavior. They function like computers, or we should say computers are a representation of the human mind. We run programs. Those programs can be interrupted and we can alter them. That's all fine. The emphasis on hypnotherapy, I think, is good. I think hypnotherapy is a really valid and underused tool because similarly it has a bad name. Not because of anything that hypnotherapists have done. It's the way it's portrayed in the media. So you're always in a fight with a client between their view of what hypnotherapy is and then what it actually is. So there are really good elements to it, which is why I still say I use NLP, because I'm not going to lie, I do use NLP. It's a major element of the approach that I have. It's part of my worldview, my gestalt for how I do trauma-based therapeutic work with people.
So if to kind of dumb it down, so the theory is that we run behavioral patterns repeatedly, and I guess then that those are the patterns that, I don't know, maintain a phobia, let's say, if I was scared of spiders.
Yep.
How would Neuro Linguistic Programming be attributed or how do you say, used as a tool to help me with that?
It would say, you've learned to be afraid of spiders. It would never look at a genetic component or childhood trauma. It's completely dismissive of trauma, which is one of its major faults. And why, if it doesn't update in the next few years, it could find itself getting cancelled by the SJWs, because the founders and some of the main proponents, especially in the UK, are very, very not careful in dismissing childhood trauma. They even say if you blame it on childhood trauma, you're doing it to yourself. That's you doing it to you. That's the NLP perspective, which is completely insane and wrong. What NLP would say of a spider phobia would be, you learned how to do this, you're continuing to do it to yourself, so stop. What is it that you're doing? You're running a strategy for phobia. What is a strategy in the simplest language possible? You are playing a certain video inside of your head of what spiders are and what they do. You're creating sensations in your body and you're telling yourself something. So they go through the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. All of this is true. They would then seek to change that video, change the audio, and change the kinesthetic feeling associated with the spider by various means. All of this is completely acceptable and does often work. Not always, but frequently does work. So they would, perhaps whatever the video is, we would identify to a nuance what it is. Whatever the audio is, we would identify it to a nuance, to a very specific degree. And whatever the feeling is, we would identify it. And then you start shifting the coordinates. So if the video you're playing is of the spider in black and white and huge and above you, we would make it small and in color and have the spider moving in slow motion over there. If the video has really scary music on it, da-da, here's a spider, we would have it be silly music or funny music or sad music. And we keep changing that with the client until the client says, okay, I feel better. That's it.
Aha, so you kind of basically reproduce the situation, but you change some, let's say, inputs or something in the circumstance, like you say, some nuance.
That's it.
Is changed. Aha, okay, I got it. That sounds pretty
It's
basic.
It's basic, and they call these things internal representations, which is it's just how you represent reality to yourself, which you do. It implies that you have agency over your internal representations, which you do to a degree. It's not the full puzzle of human psychology and of mental health issues. If it were, none of us would smoke, none of us would drink, nobody would have mental health issues, because NLP's easily been around long enough to go around the world 15 million times and have cured everyone. It hasn't done
that. But you have also, I mean, you used NLP. And you've kind of specialized in narcissism and narcissistic behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, for the uneducated people like me, what is narcissism?
So historically, it goes back to Freud. He identified that a child would go through a phase of being completely selfish and of completely self-directive. There was nothing the child would do that wasn't about feeding its own needs. Freudian psychoanalysts who came after he died called it healthy narcissism. He didn't coin the term narcissistic personality disorder. He identified that there is something called narcissism that all children should go through, and he identified it as a developmental stage. Later on, it became seen as something that could potentially become toxic, that if the child was traumatized and they were retarded in that stage of growth and stuck there, and they tried to take a toddler's mindset through into adolescence and adulthood, that they would become unbearable, obnoxious, dominating, manipulative brats who saw the world through the eyes of a spoiled 3 or 4 year old toddler. Which is a pretty good definition for most people. Like, what is narcissistic personality disorder? Sounds fancy, but just think of an adult who's essentially a brat. They're just a spoiled 3-year-old. They're cruel, they're vindictive, they're sadistic, they're mean-spirited, they're manipulative. They're only focused on what they want. They don't care who gets hurt as long as they get what they want. And their worldview is infantile. They think like a tiny, tiny child, and everything is all about them because they have no ego boundaries, so they consume the whole world. The whole world becomes them, and they see no other people in it. So if you're in contact with the narcissist never sees you. They internalize you, and you become an internalized object, which means you're just a piece of furniture in their world, and that's all you ever can be.
That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And why did you go into this? I mean, why did you choose why did you choose narcissism? I mean, why?
Yeah.
How come that route?
It kind of chose me. So I was combining psychology and neuro linguistic programming with self-defense. That's how I got a name in the self-defense field, and I got a big name. You know, it went really well. I trained a few MMA fighters to prepare for fights, but I was also helping like SWAT team members prepare for violent scenarios. And at one point, I was being in regular contact with the London Riot Centre and the United States Air Marshals. Obviously, they're not as important now, but in the 15 years following 9/11, they were huge. Really important part of air safety.
But that's when they put marshals on every flight, right?
Yeah, they literally had an armed guard on every flight because, God bless them, they believed that 9/11 was created
Yeah.
these chaps with box cutters flying commercial airliners into buildings.
Yeah.
So it was if you believe that, what's the next thing to do? Well, terrorists are getting onto our flights and hijacking the planes. Better put a policeman there to shoot them or choke them unconscious or whatever it is. So combining the psychology and the self-defense together proved very, very popular. NLP fit very, very well into that environment. What I was finding, though, with a lot of the bodyguards, soldiers, combatives instructors, MMA fighters that I was talking to, is a lot of them were pushovers interpersonally. They could go out and fight 10 bastards and kill them all, but they couldn't have an argument with their wife without sweating and crying. Or they couldn't get into assert themselves if somebody jumped the queue in front of them. They could pull out a gun and shoot you, but they couldn't say, hey, dude, like, there's a queue here. They couldn't do that. And I noticed that tendency in myself as well. So because I wanted to get back into psychology, I started providing like a coaching service for martial arts people, predominantly men, which is why I chose the name Spartan Life Coach. It was an adjunct to my original business, which was called streetfightsecrets.com. So that grew. I created a YouTube channel around that. And then my Street Fight Secrets YouTube channel was cancelled for being too violent. And so I just started focusing on Spartan Life Coach. One day I got asked, are criminals, predators, and narcissists and psychopaths? And I was like, yeah, I knew those terms. And somebody said to me, can you talk about the daughters of narcissistic mothers? And I was like, okay, I'll research it for you and I'll do a video for you. But obviously I'm not the daughter of a narcissistic mother. I did that, and that video went viral in a very, very short period of time. So it was a symbiotic relationship with the audience I had. They wanted me to talk about narcissism. They wanted me to explain psychopathy to them. So the more I did, the more I learned about it. And then 7 years later, here I am, knowing far more about narcissistic personality disorder than I really want to. But there it is.
But why? How could you somehow identify it with yourself, or some personal experiences that?
Yes, I mean I was raised in a very, very narcissistic and abusive, highly abusive family unit. My father actually is not long out of jail for abusing children in his first family, who eventually in adulthood took him to court. But it was an awful childhood environment to be raised in. It was a lot of violence, guilting, shaming, weird sexual stuff going on, a lot of alcohol, and it was bad. It was really, really bad. And I could see in myself this tendency towards codependency and people pleasing in certain scenarios with certain people. I mean, with girlfriends, I was useless, total pushover. The kids call them beta males and simps. I am a beta male and a simp. So I could identify with it, absolutely. And the more I saw of that, the more I realized that my life up until that point was a story of my response to childhood trauma and narcissistic abuse. From that, I started to study the work of Pete Walker, who'd written books about complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which really is a gateway to understanding pretty much all mental health issues. Like 90% of mental health issues can be understood through the lens of traumatic experiences. If not in childhood, at least an experience where you can't escape. Abusive marriages, abusive institutions, prisons, schools, whatever, they can all create complex post-traumatic stress disorder in people.
And this, I guess because you're saying, like, you looked back on your own life and you saw in your family patterns that were abusive and unhealthy. But I guess you didn't really know it when it was ongoing as a child or as a teenager. Did you know back then that there was something wrong, or you just thought, okay, this is how it is?
I knew that something was wrong, but back to narcissism, from a singular point of consciousness as a child, when we are narcissistic as we're supposed to be, you are the world and the world is you. There are no ego boundaries. So if mummy and daddy are fighting with each other and you're 3 or 4 years old, you don't understand that that's their problem. You think it's you that's doing it because you kind of have a godlike status. You are the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is you. You're God and you're Adam and Eve and you're the snake and you're the tree. You're everything. And so this is where the real damage is done. I can't say, oh, my dad's an alcoholic psychopath who womanizes and my mother has problems from home. I couldn't do that when I was 4 years old. That was just my reality. So my worldview when I grew up was skewed. I was like a mini Gnostic. I looked at the world and I was like, the world's mad. The world is insane. So some corruption has entered here. People are violent, aggressive, moody, joyless. Why? Like, why is everybody so pissed off? Why do we drive these ugly, fucking smelly, noisy cars? Why is everything so ugly in this world? So like I was this sensitive little artistic Gnostic kid, which manifest by the time I was 13, I was regularly dropping acid and I'd be like, why does the world look like this, man? I was like a little hippie. And so I knew something was up. I knew there was something, and I knew it was damaging me. I knew it was poisoning me. And I wanted to try and find a way of resolving it. I wanted to fix it. And
how, like, I don't know, maybe for people who, how do I know as a person that I'm a victim of narcissism? How can I, is there like a list, checklist?
Yeah. Well, what I would say after 7 years of doing this is if you've ever asked that question, or you've ever looked for a checklist, or you've ever looked on YouTube and searched, how do I know if I'm the victim of narcissistic abuse? It's highly likely that you are. Like, people who aren't don't bother. So one of the things that narcissistic abuse does is it leaves you with a very profound sense of doubt. It leaves you doubting your own perceptions, and it leaves you doubting your sense of self, and it turns you into an investigator. Narcissistic abuse leaves...
Investigating yourself?
Everything. Everything. Because narcissistic abuse really damages your perceptual filters and your sense of who you are in the world. And it leaves you obsessive and thirsty for truth, thirsty for answers, leaves you with this enduring sense that you haven't been quite told everything yet. So a lot of people who are into psychology, into magic, and into conspiracy theory, they're all pushing in the same direction in the psychoanalytic sense. Ironically enough, psychoanalysis is also a kind of conspiracy theory. It's also occultism. I imagine Freud and Jung and Adler, the major proponents of psychoanalysis, were all raised in fairly we know that they were raised in fairly abusive environments. I say this because psychoanalysis is investigating the dark. It's investigating the unconscious with the presupposition that there's something there in the unconscious.
Yeah, that something is wrong.
Something is up. And that if we look, we can find an answer. That's the roots of modern day psychotherapy. Whether people like Freud or not, you can't escape him. Like, you get these people like, oh, he's a patriarchal misogynist. And then in the next sentence, they're using concepts that he gave them. I'm like, yeah, he may have been a dick from Vienna in the late 1800s and 1900s, but okay, who wasn't? Like, who didn't talk like that or think like that? And so there is an occultism to it. Plus, of course, we know Freud was a conspiracy theorist. And so was Jung. He was an occultist, an open occultist. He studied magical systems, and so did Freud in his way. Like, he wasn't as open about it as Jung. So those of us who look to the dark, who look to the occult, who look to investigate, who look to conspiracy theory, I think, as somebody coming from the psychoanalytic theoretical tradition, it's based on a scar that points you in a certain direction. There's something in the dark that you don't know, kid. If you go and look, you'll find something that will help you feel better. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you're just wandering around in the dark, chasing your own tail. So yeah, I think there is a patterning that happens from the trauma of childhood that leads people in that direction.
But those who haven't kind of maybe identified it, but are in it, like, are there any, I mean, maybe going back to the checklist, but are there some telltale traits, like you mentioned with the child, the toddler, having that grandiose idea about the universe and I'm the center of everything? Is if we're talking about maybe, let's say, a parent-child relationship and narcissism in that sense, what would be like a telltale trait, like 2-3 things that you should notice? If if you're being treated this way, then it's most likely a narcissist.
First of all would be the massive amount of self-doubt and the tendency to investigate. The second thing would be severe emotional dysregulation, which would usually manifest. It can go right the way through the spectrum to full-blown psychosis, but drug use, gambling, drinking, sexual promiscuity, self-harm, overeating, undereating, all of these can be seen as an effort to reclaim the physiology and to reclaim the somatic state, because we just don't feel good. The victims of narcissistic abuse just don't feel good. You're just walking around, you feel shit. No reason.
It's like filling up a black hole somehow.
Trying to. I mean, I've even seen it with the way some parents are with their kids. I'm like, okay, whatever interaction I just saw, if we timed that by 10,000 incidents during a child's formative years, they'll grow up feeling weird and sad like I did. They'll grow up feeling not comfortable in their own skin because they're not with what the psychologists now call good enough parents. Parents don't need to be perfect. They're human, but they need to be good enough. If you are incapable of holding space for a child, if you're incapable of showing a child love and attention and providing decent boundaries for them, the child will grow up emotionally dysregulated. And there are physical issues that go with that. I think the third major sign of narcissistic abuse that I would identify would also be major changes in the physiological state or major changes in the personality. So if you're looking to identify an adult, are they in a narcissistically abusive relationship? Did they lose or gain a ton of weight? Did they become insomniacs or alcoholics during that period? And is their personality changing? Are they becoming more narcissistic themselves? Are they developing more narcissistic defenses, more narcissistic traits? Are they becoming more vain, more arrogant, more entitled, more in love with a delusional concept of themselves? These are the indicators, I think. For
so these things you just said now, like the entitlement and that. I mean, these are behavioral patterns of a narcissist.
Yeah.
So being entitled, being vindictive. You don't want people around you to feel good. You seek the attention. So it's very it's interesting when you said it's a very childish approach to life.
Yes. Yeah.
But you said that you did this video about, or you were kind of prompted to make that video that went viral. That was about mothers and daughters, and mom being narcissist and the daughter being the victim.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between a male narcissist and a female? I mean, is there, or is it's the same thing?
It's it's one of these the great unifiers of this world in which we find ourselves in is evil. It's the same everywhere. You could be African, Ugandan, 63-year-old woman, 21-year-old Japanese male, it doesn't matter. They say the same shit. They use the same phrases everywhere in the world. I've dealt with clients from all over, all kinds of circumstances. Evil shows up the same way. Yeah, if you're going to be a dick and you're Japanese, you're going to be a dick in a Japanese way. If you're a dick and you're Australian, but the core is the same. Narcissism is, sad to say, unfortunately, it's one of the key components of humanity, and it's one of the great unifiers. Once you boil things down to narcissism and psychopathy, every great war between extremely different cultures, the people who ran those wars, they had way more in similarity than they had in difference.
Yeah.
Which is why what we saw in World War II was these lunatics joining up with each other, holding hands, skipping down the road for a bit, and then falling out with each other again, a couple of months later over some perceived slight or insult, or and then slaughtering each other because they're alike.
It was interesting. I read this book in Iceland. It was childhood of dictators. Something they took like 10, 15 different dictators, and they covered their childhood and teenage years, and then of course some of their kind of adult, let's say, political career or whatever. And it was really, really interesting that they were all kind of, you could see the same thing in all of them. As you're saying, that's a unifier.
Absolutely. I just did a little bit of my own research the other day on Ho Chi Minh. And
he was in the book.
Was he really?
Yeah.
And you just think vain, arrogant, delusional. One of the interesting things I read about Ho Chi Minh, it's not his real name. It's it's a reference to some other great person in history.
Yeah.
And it's his name he chose means like the glowing or enlightened version of Mr. Ho. He's the better version of this other hero. You think, you arrogant prick. 50 different pseudonyms used in his whole life. Nobody really knew his personal history because he lied through his ass. Arrogant beyond belief, and they all do the same thing. Beyond race and ethnicity and national boundaries, they all harness the frustrations of the working class. They all harness the frustrations of the farm workers and people who are ill-educated. It's not very politically correct to say it, but it's historically true.
Yeah.
From Hitler, Stalin, Ho Chi Minh, name it. They harness people's frustration and ignorance, and they promise them some utopia. Listen, brothers, sisters, we must do a terrible thing, but don't worry, history will absolve us. Just over that hill is a utopia where we will all live happily ever after. What happens over the hill? Everybody who just fought their way up the hill turns on each other, and the snake eats its own tail. Every time. And here we are at this particular point in 2020 where we seem like we're ready to repeat history again.
So, narcissism is, let's say, this grandiose idea of yourself, and is the line between like self-worth, self-love, and narcissism, is that a fine line, or is like, what sets it apart?
Well, people aren't going to like this, but tough, because it's actually true to the terminology. You're supposed to have narcissism, so no, there's no line. Your self-love is narcissism. Your grandiosity, so that you have the courage to go out into the world and declare yourself great at building apps, or I don't know, teaching self-defense, or whatever it is, should be there. It's an intrinsic component. So it's not you go through some evil demonic phase when you're a child and you leave it behind. You're supposed to integrate it. You're supposed to have a sense of self that is strong. You need an ego. Forget the misinterpreted Eastern bullshit that Westerners got wrong, and now even Easterners get wrong. Nobody's advocated for the obliteration of the ego. Nobody, ever. There's no... Hinduism doesn't, Buddhism doesn't. This is all a misinterpretation. You should have strong, healthy boundaries, but you shouldn't be attached. That's all they were saying, is don't get hooked. Don't get hooked on your story. Don't get hooked into it. So the line is not between narcissism and healthy self-love. The line is between narcissism and a toxic, malignant attachment to a story of who you are that is not true. That, by definition, and people won't like me saying this either, but it's not me saying this. This is the definition of the term. It must be, to use the psychology term, maladaptive, which means it hurts you. So it doesn't just hurt the people around you. For it to be a personality disorder, it must hurt you as well. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. That's what they say. And I use their manual. I use that assessment to understand narcissism. And I think it's the correct way to look at it. Because anything else, I think we have to start saying, okay, that's not really a personality disorder. That's just a learned pattern of behavior that can be unlearned. Narcissistic personality disorder can't be, in my humble opinion, it would be very hard to unlearn that, because it's something that the adult that you have in front of you has been doing for as long as they can remember. It's something they've been doing since before they can remember. They have no other way of interacting with the world. I don't know.
So you're saying they can't be healed?
I'm saying it's with our current modern legal modalities of healing. No, they can't be healed. People place way too much faith in therapy and therapists and people in positions of authority, PhDs, people who have YouTube channels and so on and so forth. Like, therapy is a conversation between two adults. If you consent and if you follow along with the therapist, and if the therapist is good and if the rapport is good, you may make some progress over months. It's not magic. It's not like surgery. You could take a narcissist, you could take a humanitarian, you could take a communist, a capitalist, you knock them out, you give them knee surgery, pat them on the bum and send them out the door. This is not that. It's just two adults talking. Now, if you gave me a gulag brainwashing scenario with an NPD and we waived all their human rights, I probably could get some movement, but I would reduce them to an infantile state through some fairly unpleasant tactics that would effectively be the kind of thing that are done to political prisoners.
Waterboarding.
Yeah, really. I mean, the thing is with torture, we know this, or people right before they're about to be killed, people under torture and people as they're being right before execution, they call for their mothers. It's not the special forces soldier who's tough as nails isn't calling for his mother right before he dies. He's regressed. His ego has dissolved, and now he's become 4 years old again, and he's calling out to some sort of salvation as a child. So I wouldn't waterboard them, even if their family members asked me to, if their ex-wives, ex-husbands asked me to. But I would need to control their sleep, their calories, and everything. And they would be on like forced meditation protocols. They would probably be microdosing psychedelics. They would be being compelled to do empathy exercises. And even then, I don't know whether I could do it.
So it's an unrealistic thing.
You just can't. I mean, you can't wait. Like, I would be arrested for multiple crimes for even attempting it.
Okay, so you can't fix them, but then you need to learn to deal with them.
Yes.
So as a victim of narcissism, how I've granted that I can't change the person who is narcissistic, whether it's a parent or a spouse or a coworker or whatever. What do I do then as a victim? Because I guess I can change myself.
You really, the first step, and it's the hardest step, and not everybody gets there. You have to give up. You have to give up hope. Many people think they've given up hope, and they haven't. You have to give up hope. That's not a person. You can talk to your boyfriend, your girlfriend like this, but you can't talk to your mother who is a narcissist, or your boss who is a narcissist, or blah, 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 who is a narcissist, like that. You can't share any information with them. It's like in Silence of the Lambs, where Dr. Chilton is prepping Agent Starling to meet Hannibal Lecter. She says, do not approach the glass, do not touch the glass, do not hand anything to Dr. Lecter, don't let him hand anything to you. And I think her boss says to her before she goes to meet him, do not let him inside your head. Stay away. The more distance, the better. The more minimized the contact, the better. If you can never speak to them again, please do. If you have shared custody or a will to go through, or they're your boss, or you have a bad power dynamic where you simply can't escape them, minimize all contact to the... So if you have the opportunity to speak to somebody for 5 minutes and you can find an excuse to speak to them for only 1, do that. If they send you a text that's 3 texts long, reply back with 5 words. Always less, but none at all would be better. You can't win. You can't win. So give up hope that they're going to interact with you as a human being, and give up hope on winning. There's no winning. That you won't beat them at their game that they've been trained in since they were 3 years old. There's just no way.
So what about if this is, let's say, a parent, and you still want to be in touch with them? I mean, you still love your parents. You understand their limitations and so on, and not everything in the relationship is pleasant, etc., etc. And you left frustrated many times. But how do you? So you would say minimize contact. Should the contact or the communication be in a specific way or about specific topics? I mean, when you say don't let them into your head, that's maybe...
Yeah, you've really got to reframe your relationship with them. I mean, mother is a noun, but mothering is a verb. Father is a noun, but fathering is a verb. If they didn't do any mothering or they didn't do any fathering, they're only merely a mother or a father in name. And a lot of people in the narcissistic abuse community will say, you know, sperm donor or egg donor, because there was no fathering done, there was no mothering done. So that's a useful reframe. They're not actually really your father. Other people have probably done better jobs of fathering or mothering than they have in your life that you could name off the top of your head, which tells you all you need to know. And then scrub your communication clean emotionally of any hope, which is really hard to do. I mean, that's your biological source at the end of the day. Biologically, that's your mum. Biologically, that's your dad. But you must engage in the discipline, if you're going to keep contact with them, of scrubbing the emotional hope. Because there's a little boy, a little girl inside all the people listening who will hope that mummy or daddy's going to show up. They're never coming. Nobody's coming. Sorry, kids.
It's really positive. What if that person who caused you, or you, the narcissist, if that person is dead, and but you still kind of you're still burdened by it, what do you do?
That's where therapy helps. I think like good talk therapy, and a lot of the therapeutic and counseling tools that have been developed over the years, you know, developed long before I was born. Journaling, writing letters to that person, even visiting historical incidents as an adult, writing about how it made you feel at the time when you were a child, how you feel now about it, looking backwards in time as an adult, what should have happened, what was right and wrong about what happened. Establishing good moral boundaries around these events and these people is a really helpful thing to do, because their authority in your life causes you to tumble backward into moral relativism, which is a plague of our age. And you really need to reestablish, like, this was right, this was wrong, I still love you, but you don't do that to a child. Nobody should ever do that to a child. It's illegal, it's immoral, and it shouldn't have happened. So on and so forth. This can be helpful.
Because I guess that's the important thing, is to kind of let go and forgive in a way. I mean, you're not saying that the behavior was right, but you're saying, I'm not going to try to get this fixed somehow.
I think the word forgive is different for Europeans than for Americans. It really winds Americans up if you start talking about forgiveness. My suspicion is because America has got its historical roots. Even if you're American and you say you're an atheist now, your cultural coordinate's still very religious. So what you're talking about is 100% correct. It's an unburdening, a letting go for you, selfishly. So let's be really intentional with that. It's an unburdening for you. It's nothing to do with saying that what they did was okay, or that God absolves them, or they get their entry ticket back into the 5-star Hilton of heaven, or whatever it is. But yes, you must. You can't carry that. You get sick. You know, we may very well find out one day through the studies of psychoneuroimmunology that this kind of resentment could directly lead to things like cancer. We certainly know already that the stress of it can lead to heart conditions. We know it weakens the immune system, which could cause the onset of things like cancer. It definitely means that you're going to be more prone to addiction and a whole host of other issues. So you must unburden selfishly. You must detach. You've got to find a way. We could call it letting go. We could call it forgiveness. We could call it whatever you like. But you must find a way of letting go of that burden of hatred.
Yeah, I think I read this somewhere, like that the forgiveness is not for the perpetrator. It's for me to be able to let this stop affecting my life.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I felt it makes sense, because I think a lot of people spend a lot of time feeling angry and bad about something that they can't change anyway.
Yes.
So as soon as you kind of let that leave, then by nature you should be feeling better.
Yes. Yeah, it reminds me of there was a martial arts instructor, and he's a published author as well. He's done very well, Jeff Thompson from Coventry. And I had the chance to speak to him a couple of times when I was very young, and he was very influential in my life and my worldview. And he said with childhood trauma, sexual abuse, it's like the person possesses you. And so you're living with a ghost. He says you can't be walking around possessed. You can't. It's tiring. It's exhausting. You can't be walking around full of ghosts. You gotta let that go somehow, some way, however suits the individual listener.
So you, I think you said I think I saw it on your Instagram or something like that, which is Richard Grannon, right?
It's at Richard Grannon.
Yeah. You were talking about societal narcissism somehow. Has society become narcissistic somehow?
Yeah, we've been. I think the first books warning of this that came out go back to the 70s and were written by American authors about America. We've 100%. It's undeniable that our cultural coordinates massively encourage narcissism. I would even say we've managed over time in the West certainly, to invert certain cultural values. So you wouldn't put honor and courage and truth and integrity at the top. We've inverted it so you'd put greed and savagery and Machiavellianism at the top. And I would even go further and claim that narcissism is now a cultural value. So you won't just be congratulated for being greedy and psychopathic like the Wolf of Wall Street. Everybody stood around and clapped this guy. Nobody thought about all the fucking old people he'd ripped off so that he could live like a lunatic and blast all his money on hookers and cocaine. Narcissism itself is applauded. So if you get up on stage and just do something completely narcissistic, people applaud you for winning the game of narcissism. This has been that way since 2010, for at least the last 10 years. Slowly, year on year and month by month, it ramps up. You can't keep pushing the same button and get the same level of stimulation. That's not how humans work. So we're moving beyond narcissism now into a much more dangerous period of narcissistic psychopathy. This has been identified by a guy I've worked with a number of times. He has a YouTube channel called Sam Vaknin. He's an Israeli psychology professor, and he's pointed out narcissism is cute. Narcissism is like vanity plus. What we're really going to be facing is narcissistic psychopathy. There's nothing fucking cute about that. That's really dangerous. That's
what
really
will that
savage.
be? I mean, how does that...
So what you will have, I mean, like narcissism, classic grandiose narcissism, is look at me, I'm fantastic. And it's essentially As a personality disorder, it all runs on vanity. Narcissus looked into the mirror, fell in love with his own reflection. It's vanity. People ask me, like, when the narcissist does this, what do they mean? And these complicated serpentine questions with multiple layers. And I'll always reduce it down to saying, well, look, wherever the narcissist is getting narcissistic supply from, that's the key component. How does the behavior pertain to narcissistic supply? Is your husband cheating on you? Will it give him narcissistic supply? Is my wife doing this to upset me? Does it give her narcissistic supply? That's it. Not so with a narcissistic psychopath. You have hugely engorged levels of entitlement and exploitation mixed with a Machiavellianism and a perverted set of moral values, like an inverted moral value system, because psychopaths have values, but they're not the values that you and I would understand. They're the values of a criminal in prison. Somebody, dog eat dog, hit first, otherwise, hit first, otherwise the other guy's going to kill you, kind of thing.
So sociopathic.
Really nasty. Really like a nasty clawing to get to the top of the shit heap is what we're already seeing. So it will become more aggressive. It will become more violent emotionally, if not physically. Some of the outbursts of violence that we've seen recently are rooted in psychopathic narcissism. They're rooted in a worldview that is totally delusional, totally ahistorical, totally counterfactual, totally non-scientific, totally against the data. And I can back that claim up because we now have hashtags like #BanScience, #CancelScience is a real thing. People can go and look it up, because anything that disrupts my view of who I am and what I deserve must be destroyed. That's when we're moving into very dangerous psychopathic territory, because they'll follow through. Narcissists, the grandiose narcissists, they usually don't go to jail. They usually don't get caught because they really are they're vain. They want to preserve their image. Psychopaths don't give a shit about their image. They couldn't care less. You combine these two things together, it's really nasty. You will have people demanding at gunpoint that you give them the narcissistic supply that they want, whether that's through kneeling, literally kneeling in front of them, bowing in front of them effectively, saying magical words that they want you to say or whatever it is. They will force submission. They'll force narcissistic supply from you.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you deliver this stuff. I see you're big online, YouTube, Instagram. You wrote a book, Spartan Life Coach.
I've written a couple of short books around narcissism, like how to get revenge on a narcissist and narcissism secrets, that type of thing. I'm in the process of writing a book. It's got the working title Just an Echo, which is about the effects of narcissistic abuse. That'll be out early next year.
And this, when you get into this, because I read I think on your homepage, I read that you said that you kind of went online so that you could reach a larger audience versus, I guess that, and how does that work in this when you are doing a personalized consultancy with a person versus designing a message that can help a larger group of people? Is it easy to kind of make a generic? I mean, is narcissism so similar that you can actually kind of boil it down to basics and make a mass product out of it? Or?
You can. It's easier for me to do it like that. It's better for the client if they're getting individual coaching. It's just not practical, and I'm not built for it. Individual coaching leaves me with physical symptoms. I get sick, my glands swell up, and I don't mind it at the time that I'm doing it, but to swim in your, like, in order to give you insight, I'm probably doing something that counselors and therapists shouldn't do. I try to experience your childhood trauma as you, as a child, which is, it's you know, you'd be happy with it. You go, oh, this is really cool. You've given me amazing insight here.
Yeah, but
Thank
you
you.
left like a squeezed lemon.
Fucked. I'm absolutely fucked by it. And part of it is, I kind of think like it's quite horrifying at a certain level, at the unconscious level, and also just, I think, psychically, not in the woo-woo sense, but in the Jungian sense, that you have energy in the psyche. It's very draining. It's very, very draining. 4 clients a day doing that. Maybe I only do that for 15 minutes with each client, but it really, the squeeze lemon is the right way to look at it. Yeah.
But so you're kind of, let's say, you're very much, how do you say, branded in this field, I guess. So if people would like to check it out, where would that be? Where can they find this stuff?
If they just put Richard Grannon into YouTube, a ton of my videos will come up. There's a free course available from SpartanLifeCoach.com. And there's a bunch of stuff. There's a whole course that's available for free that's called the Fortress Mental Health Protection System, that takes you from A to Z as far as dealing with CPTSD goes. And it will help you find relief for the majority of mental health issues that are out there.
So that's that on the narcissism and NLP, but I wanted to kind of check in with you about how it is currently, because now we got these lockdowns, this COVID situation, and all these changes that have taken place. I mean, what are you seeing there? I mean, what do you get? I don't know, like your followers or your clients, or do you get some feedback on this? Are you seeing something now around this?
Yeah, I've had clients and followers sending me emails for months all over the world, because I asked them to, who are working in hospitals and people who are working in COVID wards, and they do it anonymously, and they don't want me to repeat what's in the emails or say names. But I think that how should I put it? The consensus that I have seen is that there is a virus. It's enormously dangerous to the vulnerable. It's really does. I think there was a Chinese doctor who came out maybe 3 weeks ago, and she was saying this has to be lab grown. I mean, it's not. It just behaves in a very, very odd way. It's probably not a naturally occurring mutation. I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist. They say, the people who've been contacting me, they say it behaves in a strange way. Very dangerous to the vulnerable. But beyond that, if you're not particularly vulnerable, as we now know, you're either going to get it and be asymptomatic, or you're not going to get it. I was looking just for straight mortality rates by population, and I think I told you the other day, the data I was looking at is from the WHO. The WHO, who's been saying since 3 weeks ago, don't do lockdowns. We do not recommend lockdowns because of the effect on human lives. The cure becomes worse than the disease. And I looked at pure mortality rates, which, whilst we're in the middle of a pandemic, I understand it's almost impossible to calculate. But the crudest calculations indicate that if you're under the age of 65, the mortality rate for this thing is the same as the 2017 to 2018 flu. I'm not saying it's just the flu, but if you're under 65, the mortality rate is the same. So I would then ask, is this worth it? Really, what we're doing, is it worth it? Is it commensurate? Is the response commensurate with the threat? And from day one, I've never had the impression, and I'm not alone in this at all. It might even be the majority of people now seem to think, but they're quiet about it because they don't want to sound like lunatics, that the response is not commensurate with the threat.
But I guess, I mean, I don't disagree with you, because I think that a lot of this, a lot of the reaction is and let's say media coverage is not fact-based or number-based.
The government coverage isn't fact-based or number-based. It's crazy.
But it is, I mean, like, it's unfortunately, these are the decisions being made by, I mean, democratically voted governments, etc., etc. So, I mean, I guess that if the majority of us finds out and believe that it's wrong, we will punish them in the next election. I mean, that's the way it should go. But when you say that the cure is more harmful than the disease, and I think that's that's the most frequent or common opinion from a psychological point of view, and that stuff. Are you seeing something like I don't know? Are you picking up something on that point of view? Is people's mental health going down?
People's mental health issues are exploding, and we will be counting the cost of this for decades. We won't know what 2020 did until 2030 and beyond, because again, as to the mortality rate issue, the problem that we all have is data and statistics, and we're still gathering it, and we've got to collate it, and then we have to make sense of it, and it will take years. And the effects of 2020 will go on for years. We'll be feeling this in 2025, without a doubt now, without a doubt. And I've been saying this from day one, and I was told, don't worry, the economy will bounce back. It'll be a V-shaped recession, and we'll bounce back stronger than we went into it. And I just said, there's absolutely no way that will happen. And look at where we are now. So yeah, the money is mental health. Freedom is mental health. The economy is mental health. You can't pull these things from each other. It's not like people try and divide it as a question of should we save the economy or save lives. The economy is lives. I mean, how rich and privileged do you have to be to not know that? The problem is a lot of the people again, we're back to class. If you're middle class and up, you won't see it, you won't feel it. But in the back streets of Liverpool and Birkenhead, they are feeling it. People who used to work are now going to fucking food banks. The shame, the guilt, the depression, the anxiety, suicide rates are going through the roof particularly in the more vulnerable areas of society at a class level. Yeah, I do okay, you do okay, we're middle class and above, we'll be fine. But some people's lives are ruined. I mean, the announcement yesterday is almost literally a death sentence for some people. The announcement last night made by Prime Minister Boris Johnson that we're doing a month lockdown at least before Christmas is a death knell really for some people. So the mental health situation is absolutely exploding.
And what is what kind of, like you said, mentioned anxiety, depression, and that then I guess results in is that like going to be long-term issues for those people? I mean, or are we already, like you said, we see suicide rates are going up?
Yep.
I mean, these are the trends that we're already seeing.
Yes.
And then there's going to be a whole lot that we will see after 5 years or 10 years or...
Yep. Years and years. This will go on for years and years because I don't know, and this is where I can end up arguing with people. Like, you've got to think of the economy and business in a more integral way. The local businesses, the small businesses, the family-run businesses are dying. Every business that you see, every shop that you see closed on a road as you're walking around is 5 or 6 families who are going to have a really shit Christmas this year. That business doesn't, when we reopen, it won't just magically reopen as well. It's gone. It's dead. Dead forever. Where's that money gone? Where's the commerce gone? Up. It's gone to Amazon now. It's gone to eBay now. It's gone to Sainsbury's, Asda, here, Billa, and so on. People are shopping online. The big corporations are raking it in. The billionaires just became even bigger billionaires. This is a huge transfer of wealth. So if we could say this will all be over in February and everybody goes back to work, they regain their dignity, yes, okay, we would have a problem and we would recover from it in 3 to 4 years. They won't go back to work. These people are now permanently fucking unemployed. There's no jobs for them. They haven't got the skills. They're not computer programmers. They're not IT people. They're not entrepreneurs. You can't just tell these people to reskill and start working online. They haven't got the first clue what to do online. So there are people who are now going to be permanently unemployed, and their unemployment will be measured in years. Sorry, not permanently unemployed, but their unemployment period will be measured in years. And I don't know how we're ever going to recover from that because factories are using robots more and more. Artificial intelligence is becoming more and more efficient year by year. They're really being pushed out of the workplace. So the only thing I can see is kind of full-scale socialism or communism, where we have to just give people money to live. The psychological effects of that will be devastating. Devastating.
Because people will lose their sense of worth, and
you can't expect people to just jump from a working system to a non-working system overnight. There are some people who will like it, but they will be a tiny minority. You're absolutely right. The self-identity, the self-worth of going out, making money for your family on your terms will be gone. They're also pushing us towards cashlessness. So our discretionary spending, our unseen spending will dwindle to almost zero within the next few years. They'll see everything and they'll crunch those numbers and they'll control all those numbers. So we're drifting further and further into a kind of totalitarian format of soft communism.
well, talking about that, like, you know, I mean, this is. I've wondered about this COVID lockdowns, curfews, and the decision making processes that we've seen. There are well, at least in where I follow things, which is in Iceland and here in the Czech Republic and a little bit in Scandinavia and of course the UK and the US. I feel like a lot of the kind of democratic mechanisms have been disconnected, and we've consolidated power into, public employers or, doctors and stuff like that. And a lot of the politicians do not want to be in the front of those decisions. They actually want to kind of take more of a backseat. And you mentioned now communism. I mean, do we have any other historical reference to the current situation other than communism? I mean, I was thinking about it before we met. Like, have we ever seen this before?
I actually shot a video in Prague this time last year, warning about the slow drift into communism. And we used as the opening shot the picture of the fractured man. The sculpture. The statue of the fractured man, which is very famous in Prague, for the effects of communism on the human being, which it splits you into pieces. It tears the individual apart. I think the only thing we can compare this to is communism. It can't be compared to fascism because it's not race-based loonies in uniforms rolling down the street in tanks shouting about a specific identified enemy, which I think most historians would agree that's what you need to fulfill for it to be fascism. It needs to be ethnocentric, it needs to be a military takeover, state of emergency, and we need an identified enemy or foreigner to be kicked out or attacked. Well, you can't compare it to that. So yeah, it's communism. It's the great equalizing, and it's doing terrible things to street-facing entrepreneurs, like the Oat Bar that you mentioned earlier. This is this classic example of a small to medium-sized enterprise. It's public-facing. It needs humans to walk through the door to buy products to make a profit. It's really not good for businesses like that. But you'll still be able to buy oats online. You can still get them delivered to your door from the huge multi-billion dollar or multi-billion crown companies. Do our politicians have stakes in these companies? Do they have special relationships with these companies? What's happening? I mean, when we discussed it the other day, I was saying I would love to believe it's just incompetence, hysteria, and cowardice. I would love.
Yeah, I hope so.
I pray to God it's that, but I don't think it is. I think this is a deliberate effort to permanently damage the economy, to force a thorough change of the economy and the way we handle money and the way we do business. God knows what that will look like. I suspect the most pain felt will be to working class, blue collar people. I suspect. But we'll all feel it. I think capitalism was always a game of kicking the can down the street. It's not designed to last forever. That's like where you have currency that's based on debt and you have a problem called inflation. You can't hold it off forever. You can't just keep printing money forever. So they're talking about this thing called the Great Reset. And I kind of think, well, it's inevitable. So maybe COVID is a smokescreen, or rather, excuse me, let me not sound like a complete conspiracy theorist. There is a virus called COVID, but maybe our response is a smokescreen to the fact that the system's breaking. It needs a big change. The big change is going to be extremely painful. Let's blame it on the virus.
Yeah, it's a perfect excuse. But how are you like personally affected by this? Because I can see that your business delivery or your like where you meet your customers is online. So I guess it's like you're not one of those who has had to gone from a physical environment into an online environment. But has something changed for you in this?
I'm very lucky in that I have an online business and it is dealing with mental health. So from a business point of view, yeah, business is great, but my heart is breaking for my friends, my community, where I'm from, up in the north of England. It's horrifying, not to sound like a doom monger, but I don't think people realize how bad this is going to get.
Yeah,
it's going to get bad now, because we've chosen this counter-scientific method called the lockdown, which there is no data to back the idea that it actually prevents the spread of the infection, because it didn't last time and it hasn't anywhere, but we're doing it anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I think I mentioned it to you the other day when I was chatting with you that it's very easy to take a kind of a middle-class office working view on this and say, yeah, I'm just working from home. I still get my salary. And so in my mind, what we've done, we took a bunch of 22 or even younger, 15 to maybe 50 years old.
Yep.
We told them to stay at home and work from home.
Yeah.
These are usually highly educated, better nurtured, more active and exercised people. So these are actually the healthy ones that could carry a virus and have, as you said earlier, has proven to have a very low, almost zero mortality rate in people under 55. But when I now go out to the supermarket, which is still open, I'm being served by a 65-year-old lady that is probably diabetic.
Very overweight.
So we keep the risk people are still digging the holes, serving the, food or whatever it is that the rest of us needs. So, and if I look at the mortality, that's 95% is over 55 years old. We've obviously not done a great job at even protecting those. So I don't know. It's really interesting, and yeah, I hope that it's stupidity and mismanagement or ignorance of facts or something like this. But it just looks too stupid to be that.
Yeah, and too consistent. You asked me personally how I feel. But just a quick point there. My girlfriend was asked to help an old lady take her shopping home just from around the corner here, from Albert to the old people's home. And I thought, yeah, there it is. There's somebody who really probably would die. She's going to die, but this would finish her off if she caught it. She has to interact with a young person who's way more likely to be a carrier than anybody else, because that's just the way it goes. An asymptomatic carrier is what she could potentially be, but she's forced to go to the supermarket and touch the cans and, everything that everybody else has been touching and breathe that air. And as you rightly say, the vulnerable are outside and the strong are inside. It's complete lunacy. And not what Sweden's done. Not what Sweden's done. The vulnerable are inside, and if you're strong and you feel capable, you may go outside. Sweden chose to treat people like adults. Goodness knows why they made that outrageous choice, and it seems to have worked okay. But yeah, personally, I was very upset yesterday with the announcement from the UK Prime Minister, because I had convinced myself that they were doing a sort of more robust approach. Some people called it herd immunity via the back door. I thought they were doing a kind of a Swedish approach, but undercover. So, wink, wink, don't go out unless you need to go to work. Wink, wink, look after yourselves, wash your hands, basically be sensible. No, that's not what they're doing. And when I say it's a death knell for the UK economy, it's no exaggeration. The biggest companies, British Airways, the director of British Airways is saying, this is British Airways, my God, is saying there's no way they will be back to anything resembling their normal economic status for the next 3 years. They don't expect to recover from this lockdown, this month-long lockdown for 3 years. Boys and girls, open your eyes. Like this is bad. This is really, really bad. These are major companies, and they're shaking, they're quaking in their boots now because it's such a mess.
But what will there be a revolution? I mean, will people eventually revolt against something like this? I mean, could you see that happen? Because it's putting a lot of economic strain on families and individuals. It's the mental distress that comes with that. Could you see that something would happen?
100%, I can see it. Yesterday, it was funny. I'm packing my bags to go to Slovakia today, and I'm sat waiting for the Prime Minister to talk. Well, not sat. I'm moving around, but I have YouTube on like it's the radio, and I'm waiting for him to talk at 6 o'clock. And I'm like, I've only seen this in movies. World War II, they would wait for Winston Churchill to come on and say, today, this is the... So I'm waiting for him to come on. And he comes on, and his scientific advisors come on. And I'm just like, do you want riots? Is that what you want? This feels like you want riots. This feels like you want a revolution. This feels like you're trying to goad people to revolt. British people are not revolting. They're not that type. We're not like the French. We don't hold strikes all the time. We don't have that sort of like the socialist revolutionary spirit is not there. But keep poking us with a stick. I'm pretty sure we can do a good impression of it, as everybody will across Europe, as is already starting. Violent protests here in Prague in Old Town Square for the first time in God knows how long. It's not the Czech way, but they'll do it if you keep pushing them. The Brits will, everybody will in the end. So yeah, I do think we certainly should be talking about the prospect of widespread, wide-scale rioting across all of Europe. And in the end, revolution. I think we have to talk about it as a prospect for 2021, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how it kind of plays out in the next few months.
Sure.
If you were to the listeners that are, sitting at home and they've had their freedom limited, they don't go out as much, they don't meet as many people, they don't go to concerts, they don't go to the theater, not to the cinema, they don't go to restaurants. There's a lot of stuff that has been kind of removed from our day-to-day routine, and as you said earlier, that has an impact on us. Are there any kind of, let's say, mental hygienic things that if you were to advise people, try and stick to this or whatever, something else than a mask and a hand sanitizer? I mean, what would you advise people to do?
I would say you're in prison, so treat it like a prison sentence. If you're a sensible person, I hope if you were given a prison sentence, you'd say, right, I'm going to get in shape. This is the time to get really fit. This is the time to take that master's degree I wanted to do, or write the book I wanted to write, or learn to speak Japanese, or to make a souffle or whatever.
Or start that podcast that you always wanted to start, like I did.
So it's good for some things creatively. Yeah. Now's the time. Get on with it. You've got time. Meditate, do yoga, get outside as much as your communist totalitarian regime allows you to. Connect with your friends, read the books, get off Netflix. Try not to use Amazon and eBay. Try not to use Netflix. Try not to be glued, plugged into mainstream media and social media all day long. You will get depressed. You'll get fat. You'll get anxious. Get tough. Get strong. Get disciplined. You should have a day that is scheduled like it would be in prison or like in the army. Keep it consistent. Go for it every day. Get your family on board. Don't let this fucking thing... It's a tough moment in human history, for sure. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's tough.
I feel bad. I feel bad for people because I'm okay. I've got money. And I've got choice. I've got freedom.
Yeah, we're the lucky ones.
We're all right.
Yeah.
We're all right. But I know what this is like.
Yeah.
I know what this is like for people who've got their kids at home.
Yeah.
They've got a family. They got no money.
Yeah.
They don't know what's coming next.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for them,
these
man.
are the real victims, and this is what I keep saying, and we talk about in my home is that we're floating on the top.
Yeah.
We don't have a fucking clue what's going on with people that actually need to go out there and provide and do stuff, and they have people depending on them, kids and stuff like that. It's horrible.
I was just imagining, like, what I'm saying, and some poor family. I was listening to something yesterday, and they're saying a lot of people can't even afford internet. Never mind saying get off social media. They've not been on internet because it's a 30 quid a month expense that they now can't afford. And I'm thinking, fucking hell, get the kids out. Everybody goes to the park together. You go for a walk. You go home. You watch TV. What's next on the schedule? I don't know. Do some fucking push-ups or something. Oh, it's so tough. It's easy for me saying this from a middle class point of view, but I feel so bad for people who I know the torture that this must be for some people.
And what I don't like in this is that I feel that this voice or this group of people is being ignored, and we are taking, not just in this subject, but in some way we're taking a Western middle higher class view on everything, and it's unfair. It's very selfish, and it's entitlement, and that's for me it's narcissism.
It's narcissism. It's narcissism. Narcissism is the real virus here. Narcissism is the major threat. All the politicians, all the decision makers, the people who are in the infrastructure, the doctors, the people making podcasts, it's not us. It's not, but the people who are making these decisions, it's like, I wish I could send them to some of the places and from where I'm from, and just make them live with a family and go, this is you, this is what you did. Yeah. Look at this. Look at him getting drunk and
beating up his kids or whatever happens. Yeah, it's horrible. Richard, is to people in this COVID lockdown, quarantine, whatever, stay active, stay healthy, do the stuff that you always dreamt about, and come out of this stronger than you went in.
That should be the goal. That should be the intention, is to come out of it stronger than you went in.
And if you're in a situation which is not favorable, because as we were talking about, it's easy to look at this from the point of us that are kind of floating on top like the cream, in some sense. The ones that are in trouble, where can they reach out? Should they reach out? Are there helplines?
Yeah, there's obviously country by country. You do have support networks. There are helplines for people in America. It will be done state by state. Ask for help if you think you need help. Reach out and ask for it. I'll be continuing to produce free content to entertain and educate, keep tittillating you cerebrally. That'll be there on YouTube for people to enjoy. And if you do need help, reach out to your friends. Do keep in contact with family members and keep talking to each other. We've got the time to do it, so make sure you're doing that.
Yeah. And if people want to follow you, so that's your webpage?
Is SpartanLifeCoach.com.
And then Instagram at Richard Grannon.
Richard Grannon is my Instagram.
Yeah. And YouTube, I guess, is the same.
Yeah, they could just put Richard Grannon into YouTube, and I'm everywhere.
Yeah, I noticed that. Okay, so. Well, Richard, thanks for coming. This has been really... I feel that I could have sat here for a few more hours.
Me
maybe
too.
I'll just have to get you back again when you come back from
That'd be
California.
great. Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
okay, you guys that listen, thanks for listening. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope you didn't hear the heavy breathing of my dog. I remembered to switch off the electricity so the fridge didn't start. The music on the show is by the band Solstafir and another band called 13. Some people have been asking me about that. Please follow me. I have a Facebook page called The Bunker. How the hell did we end up here? My Instagram is Midlife Crisis Warrior and my Twitter is Midlife Crisis Warrior. So feel free to send me anything, comments, questions, or whatever. Share this with your friends. I'm always looking, I'm very vain, I'm almost narcissistic, so I need followers. I need people to pay attention to all the great stuff that I'm doing. Hope this has been helpful. Richard, have a nice trip to Slovakia.
Thank you very much.
And you guys, stay safe. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.